Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Test Anxiety Podcast. I'm Scott Miller.
And I'm Marcee Martinez.
We heard every Friday morning on WUSA at the University of St. Augustine.
Hey, Scott, it's great to see you today. So, I have a question for you. What sits at the bottom of the ocean and quivers and jitters?
What sits in the ocean and quivers and jitters? Let me think. That's a good question, and I have no idea.
A nervous wreck.
Oh my God, that's funny. That had to have come from your daughter.
It sure did. That was her joke of the week.
I
And it was
love
a
it. I love it. Please tell her I said so.
it's a great segue into our topic today, which is test anxiety.
Yes, everyone's had that.
So, most individuals experience some degree of anxiety when they face a test. Anxiety that causes our brain to freeze while taking a test is really about what we tell ourselves concerning our own ability to do well on any given test. Anxiety has been a primary variable of interest for researchers in understanding the roles of emotion and performance for more than 70 years. And over this time, there have been significant changes in our understanding of anxiety. According to the American Psychological Association, anxiety is typically categorized by feelings of tension, worried thoughts, and a variety of negative physiological reactions.
That's very interesting. What kinds of physiological responses would you see or experience besides like sweaty palms or something like that?
Well, they have shown in students with test anxiety restlessness, increased blood pressure, difficulty concentrating, and even severe symptoms such as insomnia and fatigue, abdominal pain, and unusual body movements or tremors, kind of like a nervous wreck,
I wouldn't be surprised if I've had several, if not all of them.
right? And so, test anxiety is defined as the fear or worry of negative evaluation, consequences, or failure in a testing or evaluative situation. And this results in those negative behavioral, physiological, and/or emotional responses. When faced of an assessment of ability, there's often an implicit concern of negative consequences based on test performance. And this focus on the evaluation setting and the stress or anxiety that accompanies that is what differentiates test anxiety from other forms. So several researchers show that anywhere from 15 to 22% of students and up to 38.5% of college students have experienced high levels of test anxiety. There are noted gender differences in the research as well. Females seem to be more affected by test anxiety, and there seems to be a higher incidence in healthcare students such as nursing and medical students.
Well, I can imagine that. That is just a remarkable percentage. That's very interesting to me. You know, as you know, I have a keen interest and love of history. So in my head, I want to know, how has our understanding changed over the years about test anxiety?
Well, so over the last several decades, we've really come a long way in understanding test anxiety. Through the 60s and 70s, one of the primary theories was based on what was called the interference model, which suggested that depressed performance was due to factors such as emotionality and worry that disrupted or disturbed the process of information recall and information utilization during testing. It's sort of like brain freeze. The stress prevents us from retrieving information during a test that we thought we had committed to memory while studying. This is one of the reasons why we can walk out of a test and then remember the answers.
We've all experienced that.
Yeah, we have. And then as we moved into the 80s, researchers looked more to the deficits model, which linked the anxiety directly to deficits in knowledge and in skills, especially such as study skills, self-efficacy, right? That internal thought process of how well you're going to do, your motivation, and specific testing strategies that are all needed to perform well in testing situations. As we moved into the 90s and the 2000s, we've started to see this theory of brain freeze and the prior information, and used some valid information from those early theories. But research currently suggests that neither one of them is capable of explaining the dynamic and highly variable nature of test anxiety. So the new models, such as the one proposed by Lowe and his colleagues, suggest a biopsychosocial model of test anxiety. And this includes the biological, such as the parasympathetic nervous system, the limbic system and memory and hormonal responses, and psychological bases, such as self-concept or self-efficacy and motivation, that interact with that educational or social context. Siegel and colleagues built on this concept from Lowe and developed a cognitive behavioral framework that combines the cognitive perceptions and prior learning experiences along with demographic characteristics, social or educational context, and environmental contingencies such as educational expectations.
You know, it's so interesting with that large body of research and our increased understanding about test anxiety. It seems to me that students are more stressed than they ever have been.
Yeah, that seems to be true. And research is showing that students are having higher levels of test anxiety. And over the decades, not only has our understanding of anxiety changed, but the use of testing for evaluation of students has changed. High stakes testing with standardized exams that are used not only for student evaluation and progression, but also for evaluation of teachers and institutions themselves have significantly increased the levels of test anxiety in students, even in younger grades.
So then why is it a big deal?
Well, that's a great question, Scott. I mean, we care about test anxiety for several reasons, with test scores and performance only a small part of the bigger picture. So, research has shown that teaching methods can certainly impact test anxiety in students, with teachers who utilize negative motivational strategies such as fear or threats, and then appeal to external outcomes such as moving up a grade versus being held back or not getting into college. Um, they contribute to higher levels of test anxiety. So our teaching methods in general can be modified to help reduce test anxiety and help students be more effective and more productive. But from a student perspective, in and of itself, um, self-esteem and self-efficacy were consistently found in the research to have the strongest relationships with test anxiety. Self-concept and test anxiety are highly correlated. Students may have significant difficulties with test anxiety due to negative beliefs of themselves and their ability to succeed in personal or academic environments. So research, as reviewed by von der Emps and colleagues in their 2008 meta-analysis, showed significant relationships between test anxiety and a whole host of negative variables, including an increased risk for subsequent anxiety and depression, poor class grades, difficulties engaging in instructional or academic content, and low test performance. Gerwig and colleagues stated that test anxiety can lead to lower GPAs and increased dropout rates. Yet up to 11.3% of university students who reported high test anxiety stated that they wouldn't seek help because they felt there were negative ramifications or they were embarrassed. And up to 20.5% felt that their professors would be unable or unwilling to help them. And I find that really sad and shocking. So, Scott, I guess my question is, how do we help our students address this issue? I think you might have some information on that.
You know, Marcy, you're right. And I just have to also quickly say that that is an astonishing statistic. It's just blows me out of the water. But yes, so excellent question that you asked, Marcy. I just wanted to say that you've provided us with some excellent and amazing information on the history of test anxiety. so that we are now that we are more equipped with this information, we can look into dealing with it. How do we apply the lessons we have learned from the historical context that Marcee has so skillfully presented? Well, that's what I'm going to give you guys a little insight into. So, how are we going to combat it? We have an arsenal of skills. First one would be recognition of the test anxiety, coping with test anxiety, seeking out help or study groups, test preparation that does not include the ever-present cramming by some students, and also mindfulness. So self-recognition. According to the Praxis series, which is a test prep for the Praxis test, recognition of having test anxiety is useful because it strikes in two places, the head and the body. In your head, you get racing thoughts, difficulty concentrating, negative thoughts about, I'm not good enough for this, I can't do this, blanking out of time of exam, such as you mentioned, the brain freeze.
Yeah, this sounds a lot like brain freeze.
Exactly. In your body, you get nauseous, you start sweating, you're feeling faint, headache, racing heartbeat, you tense up.
This sounds a lot like our nervous wreck.
It is a nervous wreck, and this information all correlates to with Lowe's study that you mentioned with the biopsychosocial and the psychological basis. So, daily coping skills. How do we cope? Stress coping strategies are identified by researchers as conditions used suitable to a situation where adolescents have a change in their environment or a stressor they cannot control. So that's a little heady information, and Praxis has a great way that they broke that down. Simple skills to help cope, to help cope with the big test. And some of them might seem obvious, but some of them not so much. So the first one, you are unfamiliar with the test? Well, you need to become familiar with the test. You need to know and make sure that you know everything that's going to be on that test. The testing environment gets on your nerves where you're taking the test. You need to learn to be able to tune out those distractions. You haven't mastered the subject matter. Counter that with positive thoughts and action on mastering the subject matter. Think, I've got this, not, oh, I'm never gonna get this. Your body shows signs of anxiety. Well, that can happen. So you have to take care of your body and your mind. I picture just a student running over to McDonald's and grabbing some food because they know they have to study for the night. Well, that's not helping your mind or your body at that matter.
The whole pizza as study food just doesn't really cut it, does it?
Exactly. Your mind goes blank or wanders. You need to learn to stay focused. Okay, and so you have negative thoughts. You want to make an organized study guide that will help you get rid of those negative thoughts because you can show that you are progressing along. One other thing that Praxis mentioned is a non-coping skill, which is the classic avoidance, or pretending that if you ignore it, it will go away. It's the classic head in the sand.
Yeah, this sounds a lot like that parasympathetic nervous system response of fight or flight. We
That's
can either
exactly
take these
correct.
simple skills and cope, or we can stick our head in the sand and pretend that it'll go away.
That makes perfect sense. So one of the greatest things that you can do is get yourself into a study group or at least seek out help. Study groups, also are known as social learning groups, are particularly effective for completing projects, developing presentations, and lo and behold, preparing for exams. So there's a couple different things you can do, or it does, I should say. It can help you improve your notes. Study groups is an excellent way for you to look at the notes that you've taken in class as opposed to the notes that someone else has taken in class. You may have forgotten a key word that they didn't, or vice versa. So you're helping each other out. You're also developing a support group, even if you don't realize it. You're creating that support group. School can be very stressful, as everyone knows. So it's advantageous to seek support from other people that are in similar situations. Obviously, a study group is the best way to do that. Study groups also help you set goals. They help with focus, and they help with being and maintaining organization. If you're naturally not that organized, they're going to kind of force you to be a little bit more organized.
Yeah, and I think, Scott, that studying in a group is a great way to make learning a little bit more fun. And it kind of goes back to the old adage of misery loves company, right? It's really hard to spend all those long hours in the library by yourself and really stay focused and on task. So learning with a study group can really make things a lot more enjoyable.
I completely agree. One of the other things that I read was with study groups, there's a how, a who, a where, a how long, and a when. How says how many people should be in the group, and they say you should really limit it to 4 to 6 people. If you get more than that, you're going to have little conversations here and there, and people are not really going to be studying well. The who, you want to pick people that are in your study group that have the same ideals as you, that you really want to do well in these tests and do great in the class, people that want to succeed. Where they suggest going somewhere that you have no distractions. Most colleges have libraries or study rooms. For example, in the building I'm in at my college, we have several study rooms for our students. How long? They say that you should not study more than 2 to 3 hours in the study groups. And that makes sense to me. That's a fair amount of time. And when? If you plan to meet regularly with a study group, you should keep that. It helps keep you organized. It works on your goals as well.
I think those are great tips as far as studying with a group. I think one of the hard things about a group is to keep them focused.
That's very, very true. I agree. So test preparation, I mentioned not cramming, and this video is a classic crammer, although she's not really getting, he or she, I'm not quite sure, are not getting anything in there. So don't be this student. What you want to do is ask for suggestions from your instructor. Some instructors provide a study guide, some do not, but it can't hurt to go up and ask, hey, I know it's chapter 11, but what about this, and this? What should I study on more than another? Plan to rest as well. Get a very good night's sleep. Avoid drinking coffee if you can. That's hard for many people that have that addiction. You really want to avoid people that might erode your self-confidence. You already might not be feeling completely great about this. And if they feed into that, that's going to run you down a path that's not going to be helpful for you. I know it seems a little odd to say wear layers so you can adjust for the temperature of the testing site because it probably is the same classroom you've been in for the whole semester. However, you may not know that the night before the air conditioning died or the heating died. So if you come prepared, you can adjust to the temperature and it makes it much easier to take that test. So if you encompass those all together, you're setting yourself clear goals and objectives. You're being prepared and you're staying focused.
Those are great tips.
So the last thing I wanted to bring up is mindfulness. They're becoming very popular. Some people don't necessarily agree with them. Some people think that people are just trying to make a quick buck, which I understand where they're coming from. But so are they really worth it? Marcee, do you have any apps that you use?
I do. I use an app called Chill, and it gives me a daily quote, inspirational quote, and then it'll give me random reminders through the day. I can set how many I get, and it'll pop up things like bring your attention back to your body, or are you rushing? Is it because of habit? Think about what you're doing. So it's really a cool app. And then I do some yoga, which helps me focus.
I really need to get onto yoga. I'm glad you mentioned that. I too use the Calm app that I have here on the slide, and I use it every day after getting home from work. And it has you sit in a quiet place, and they play some calming music, and they have you do some breathing exercises. And then during work, I have a smartwatch that tells me when to stop and take some certain amount of breaths, and they coach you through it. It also tells me to get up and walk when I need to, which forces you kind of to clear your head. So really, we have these are two great things, two great. Sorry, I've lost my thought. Two things in our arsenal that can really help you. I'd like to just mention two quick quotes about meditation apps that I thought were really interesting. Meditation apps can help curb addiction as well. In a recent study published in the Journal of Substance Abuse Treatment, researchers at the University of Southern California found that 8 weeks of mindfulness training led to decreases in craving and relapses among adults in rehab. Now you're saying, why did I bring that up? That talks about addiction. Well, if you're having test anxiety and you're having thoughts of, oh, I'm not good enough for this, I'm not going to pass this test, I'm not going to do that, this tells you right here that if you do this, it's going to help you be more positive. The other quote I have is, apps are easy, accessible way to practice at home, and several new ones targeting addiction are going beyond simple meditations with features such as trigger tracking, motivational messages, medication and mindfulness reminders, and an on-a-demand group therapy. Now, I bring this one up, even though it does mention addiction again, because there might be triggers that you have that triggers your test anxiety, besides just the test being on the schedule. You need that motivational message, and obviously not anything about medications, but the mindfulness overall is going to be very helpful to you. And as I mentioned, I use the Calm app, and I really feel it's done wonders, especially when I come home after a really crazy day. I sit and it really just helps me calm down, and then I go work out, so that even helps me even better.
I think those are great resources to use, and anything that can help us improve our self-image and our self-concept, help improve that self-efficacy about, like you stated before, I can do it rather than I'm never going to be able to. Anything that can
Exactly.
help us get there is fantastic.
I completely agree. So we have a few takeaways from today's episode. Understanding of test anxiety is still evolving. There's, as Marcee said, 70 years of research, but it's still going on to really figure it out. But we have such a large arsenal of things that we can use to combat it now. Students have great tools, as I said, to combat the test anxiety. You want to be positive. You want to work in groups. You want to realize you are all in this together. Adopt the habit of using a mindful app. I think you'd be very impressed with how much and how far it will actually go for you.
Yeah, Scott, I think we've had a huge variety of tools and methods that can really help students address the biological and physiological aspects, as well as the emotional and cognitive aspects of test anxiety. So the big goal is that we really want to help them reduce their test anxiety and keep their ship afloat. No more nervous wrecks.
Right. We don't want any more quivering at the bottom of the ocean. Well, I can't believe it, Marcee, but we have already come to the end of our podcast. I just don't know where the time goes. It's crazy.
It goes in a hurry.
It really does. And I really think we've had some great information about test anxiety. So as always, we hope that you've enjoyed our hints, tidbits, and information, and hope that you can apply it to your life. I'm Scott Miller.
And I'm Marcee Martinez.
Let's have a great day out there.
Bye.